Okay, this is your first pre-lab video for AP Bio. As far as your formal lab report guidelines, you don't necessarily need to worry about them right now. You will have ample opportunities to do the necessary research to have a good introduction. However, when we are doing the lab, make sure you're writing down the procedure and you're writing down the materials that you're using in detail. That way, when it comes time to do that part in your lab, you're good to go. My recommendation is when you come into lab tomorrow, do not have your lab notebook with you. I want you to have just some separate sheets of paper. However, make sure that when you are taking notes, both here and in tomorrow's lab, that you save all those notes because they're going to be important when you're doing your lab write-up. So, your first lab is actually an enzyme lab. Many of you may have done it before, but it may not have been written like this. Okay, this lab's title is the effect of hydrogen ion concentration has on invertase action in Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Now, makes nice, pretty words, nice big words. What this really means is hydrogen ion concentration, pH. How does pH affect invertase, an enzyme, okay, in Saccharomyces cerevisiae, yeast, bread yeast? So it looks really big, it looks real pretty, and it'll have a nice big headline for you, a nice big title, but it's pretty much how does pH affect yeast's action on sugars. Okay, invertase is an enzyme that is used to break down sugars. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive a little more into what we're doing. You're going to have some tubes, okay? And in those tubes, you're going to have yeast and you're going to have sucrose. You're probably going to have a control, okay? And we'll go over what your lab itself is going to look like. But the background of it, you have sucrose. It is a dimer, right? It's a disaccharide that's composed of fructose and glucose, okay? Well, the process of that sucrose becoming fructose and glucose is facilitated by an enzyme, okay? And that enzyme is invertase. So between sucrose and fructose being formed, you're going to have an enzyme-facilitated hydrolysis. Hydrolysis meaning water is also going to be lost. H2O is lost, right? And an enzyme is going to be involved in this process. Okay? All right, in this lab, you are going to be given 4 test tubes. Okay? I'm not going to tell you what to put in them. Okay? But what we want to do is we want to, like I said in our title, determine how pH is going to affect the enzyme that yeast produces to break down sucrose into fructose and glucose. So the kind of stuff you will have some hydrochloric acid available to you, very low concentrations by the way, and you'll have some sodium hydroxide available to you, also lower concentration. You'll have to determine what the pHs of those substances are when you're doing your lab, but I'm going to give you plenty of yeast solution. Okay, it's going to be, I'm going to make some yeast happy and they'll be ready to go. You're going to have a sucrose solution, you're going to have some Benedict's reagent, and a heat source. Now the Benedict's reagent is how you're determining if the sucrose was actually broken down, because as it turns out, sucrose is negative for the Benedict's test, and fructose and glucose are positive for the glucose test. So when you are testing to see if it broke down the sugar, if it's positive for a Benedict's test, then you end up with you end up with a color change. I'm not going to tell you what color, you got to figure that out, but you'll notice an obvious color change. And in order for this reaction to happen a little faster, we're going to have a heat source, probably a hot plate with a beaker of water, so you can just set the test tubes in there and then it'll heat up. Okay? So, you're going to have 4 test tubes. Okay? If you want to have a 5th, you're welcome to. If you want to have only 3, you're welcome to. But how I see this lab happening, I see it happening with 4 to make sure that you cover all your bases on a scientific aspect. Or in a scientific sense, excuse me. So we have yeast, sucrose available to you. You're going to have Benedict's reagent, you're going to have a heat source, and you're going to have some hydrochloric acid and some sodium hydroxide. Again, they are going to be fairly low concentrations. Okay? You are not going to need closed-toe shoe for this lab, but like I said, make sure you bring these notes and some more paper so you can take better notes during the lab.